chamber was colder than the void outside. Steel walls pulsed faintly with the steady thrum of ancient machinery, casting eerie shadows across the gathered figures. General Threxel Varun stood tall, his mottled skin stretched tight over sinewy muscle, the scars of countless battles marking his visage like a brutal map. His 3 eyes, 2 burning with harsh amber, the third, a faint violet, scanned the assembly of warlords and counselors who had convened on this cold night. They had called him here to explain what the reports whispered in fear and disbelief. A force unlike any the Dominion had faced. A force that had shattered fleets, razed worlds, and left even the most seasoned commanders trembling. A force called humans. Threxal's jaw tightened. The name tasted strange on his tongue, like biting into raw iron. Humans, he said, voice low and gravelly, the words echoing in the vaulted chamber. The council, draped in ornate armor, exchanged skeptical glances. General Arcath, a younger but ambitious officer, scoffed quietly. Humans, primitive apes from a backwater system. How could they possibly threaten the might of the Dominion? Threxal's amber eyes narrowed. That is what we thought. And that was our first mistake. He began pacing slowly, every footfall deliberate and heavy. When we first encountered them, it was at the edge of our expansion. System VX-881, a dead star's shadow. We expected compliance. We expected swift surrender. The room fell silent. The council's curiosity piqued despite themselves. But instead, Threxel continued. They opened fire. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Not with desperation, not with chaotic fury, with precision, with cold, calculated efficiency that tore through our formations as if we were nothing more than ragged cloth. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. One counselor whispered, "It was an ambush." "No," Threxel corrected, his voice rising with grim certainty. "It was a declaration, a challenge. They said without words, 'We will not yield. We will not break.'" He raised a clawed hand, imagining the scene in vivid detail. Our flagship, the Sarnath, was the first to fall. It wasn't a glorious explosion. It was a surgical strike. One moment our sensors hummed with confidence, the next a silence so complete it filled the void itself. General Arcath shifted in his seat, unease flickering across his features. Threxal's gaze swept the room, locking eyes with each listener. "You must understand. They are unlike any enemy we have faced. They do not fear death. They do not seek glory. Their strength lies in their unpredictability. They adapt, they innovate, and they fight with a ferocity born of desperation." He clenched his fists. "We sent fleets after them, but they vanished like ghosts. Our sensors failed, our weapons missed, entire squadrons were lost to tactics. We cannot yet comprehend." The youngest counselor, barely out of training, dared to ask, "But surely, General, the humans must have weaknesses?" Threxel smiled, a thin, humorless curve. "They do. They bleed. They fear. But what terrifies me most is their will. Their refusal to surrender even when cornered. Their willingness to sacrifice everything to protect their home." He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the cold like a blade. "I have faced the fiercest warriors of the Dominion. I have commanded battles that decided the fate of 1,000 worlds. But these humans, they are something else entirely. A storm waiting to break." The chamber grew still. No one dared speak, the weight of the general's words pressing down like the crushing vacuum outside. Finally, Threxal straightened and raised his voice. "Mark my words, counselors. If the Dominion does not prepare for humanity, we will fall not with a roar but with a whisper. Because they do not fight like us. They fight like the last hope of an entire species. And that is terrifying." The doors hissed shut behind him as he turned away, leaving the council to grapple with a new reality. One where the galaxy's most feared empire might soon tremble before a species they once dismissed as insignificant. Outside, in the cold silence of space somewhere deep within the unknown, the human fleets moved, silent, relentless, and unstoppable. The cold void stretched infinitely around the jagged asteroids of the Sci-Fi Rift, a dangerous maze of shattered rock drifting near the outer edge of Dominion space. The Zarketh fleet moved cautiously, vessels sleek and armed with arrays of deadly plasma cannons and missile pods. General Threxal Varun's flagship, the Sarnath, led the formation, an imposing warship bristling with weaponry and pride. The atmosphere was taut with the confidence of seasoned veterans, ready to crush what they believed to be a minor threat. But the humans had been waiting. Hidden in the shadow of a massive asteroid cluster, their ships, sleek and angular, painted in cold white and blue, lurched forward like silent predators. Unlike the brash tactics the Dominion expected, the humans struck with patience and precision. Threxal watched the tactical display on his command deck. The Sarnath's sensors scanned the rocky labyrinth for signs of the enemy. For hours there was nothing but space and silence. Then suddenly the first volley came. Silent torpedoes gliding through the void, targeting engine arrays on the outer flanks. Explosions rippled across the fleet like shockwaves in a storm. The Sarnath rocked violently, systems flashing red warnings. Threxal gritted his teeth and barked orders to counterattack. But the humans were not like any opponent he had faced before. Their fighters darted in and out of asteroid cover, striking from blind spots no sensor could detect. There, weapons fired with uncanny accuracy, disabling power cores and communications with surgical strikes. The Zarketh ship's retaliations were met with evasive maneuvers impossible for even their fastest interceptors to follow. On the command deck, Threxal's three eyes scanned the chaos. He saw the devastation unfolding on the holographic battlefield, a tapestry of fire and smoke blooming against the stars. The Sarnath's shields flickered under sustained fire. Alarms screamed as a missile barrage found a weak point. A violent shudder rolled through the ship as the bridge lights dimmed. The flagship's forward weapon systems went dark. The human ships moved closer, and a voice, cold and steady, crackled through the comm channels. No threat. No negotiation. Just a single phrase repeated calmly. No gods. No kings. Just humanity. Threxal's jaw clenched as the flagship's engine sputtered. The Sarnath lurched sideways, losing formation. He barked orders to regroup. But the humans were relentless. Like a swarm of hornets, they struck and vanished, exploiting every opening with brutal efficiency. One by one, the Dominion ships fell into disarray. Smaller vessels were cut off, overwhelmed by the unexpected ferocity. Panic began to ripple through the ranks, an emotion foreign to the cold discipline of the Zarketh. From the command deck, Threxal watched a younger captain's ship explode. In a cascade of fire, its crew lost in an instant. The image burned into his mind, a reminder that these humans were not just warriors, they were predators. In the thick of battle, a daring human fighter swooped dangerously close to the Sarnath, unleashing a devastating plasma blast that crippled the flagship's navigation systems. The ship spun uncontrollably, vulnerable, and exposed. Threxal shouted orders, but the tide was turning. The humans were not just fighting to win, they were fighting to survive. Every move they made was calculated, every strike measured. Their unyielding will turned the battlefield into a nightmare the Zarketh were unprepared for. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was clear. When the last Zarketh cruiser burned in the cold void, silence settled over the rift. Threxal stood on the ruined bridge of the Sarnath, surrounded by dying consoles and the stench of burnt circuitry. He knew this was only the beginning. The humans had shattered their arrogance and proven a brutal truth. The Dominion was not invincible. As the survivors limped back to Dominion space, Threxal's voice was grim when he reported to the High Council. They do not fight like us. They do not honor tradition or hierarchy. They fight with a cunning and rage we have never seen. If we underestimate them again, we will not survive. Behind him, the stars blinked cold and indifferent. Somewhere, beyond the horizon of their knowledge, the humans waited, patient, prepared, and terrifyingly ready for war. The Dominion fleet had barely begun to recover from the massacre at Sci-Fi Rift When reports began arriving from the outer sectors, fleets disappearing without a trace, entire patrols vanishing as if swallowed by the darkness itself. General, Threxel Varun stared down at the flickering holographic map in his war room aboard the Ironspire command station. Each blinking red dot marked a lost fleet, a hole in Dominion control expanding like a wound. The void itself seemed to betray them. Sensors failed to detect any sign of enemy ships. No debris, no distress signals. Just silence, yet every loss was real. Threxel rubbed a scar on his forearm, the memories burning fresh. He had lost a full escort squadron, the Varga Hunters, to what the intelligence officers called ghost strikes. The name sent chills through even the most stoic officers. Attacks carried out by unseen, unheard ships that appeared and disappeared without warning. The human forces had learned to fight in the shadows of space. It began with rumors, fleets, wiped out with no warning, no trace of hostile craft on scans. Then survivors' reports trickled in, fragments of horror stories told in broken voices. Entire crews lost to invisible weapons. Communications scrambled by strange electronic interference. Ships boarded by unknown assailants who left no survivors. Threxel's jaw clenched as he reviewed intercepted transmissions captured by Dominion spies, a cacophony of garbled signals that, when decrypted, revealed chilling details. Humans had engineered stealth technologies that bent light and warped sensors, rendering their ships nearly invisible. But more terrifying was the way they fought. Small, fast raiding parties using electronic warfare to cripple Dominion defenses before delivering devastating strikes. In one report, a Dominion cruiser lost all power suddenly, drifting helplessly while human fighters swarmed in. The survivors spoke of mechanical horrors, drones modeled on the humans' own designs but twisted, savage, and relentless. Once the ships were disabled, these drones swarmed through the hull, eliminating the crew with brutal efficiency. Predators. In the dark, Threxel muttered. We hunt shadows, but the shadows hunt us. He turned to his tactical officers. We must adapt our sensors. We cannot fight what we cannot see. But the problem was deeper. The humans did not just use technology, they used strategy. Their unpredictability shattered the Dominion's rigid doctrines. They attacked supply lines, ambushed reinforcements, and struck at critical points in ways that made no logical sense to Dominion command. They think like nothing we have ever faced, Threxel said, eyes narrowing. They do not value honor. They do not fight fair. A junior officer interrupted nervously. General, our attempts to capture prisoners have failed. Every raid ends with prisoners dead or missing. We have no way to learn their intentions, or command structure. Threxel's gaze hardened. They are not like us, they do not surrender. They fight until the last breath and they expect the same from their enemies. He walked over to the viewport and stared out at the swirling darkness of space beyond the station. Somewhere out there, human fleets moved unseen, striking and disappearing, sowing chaos and fear. The air was heavy with the unspoken truth. The Dominion was losing control of the frontier. The once invincible fleets now hunted by ghosts. In one desperate attempt, Dominion engineers developed new sensor arrays designed to penetrate the human stealth fields. The results were both a breakthrough and a nightmare. The arrays detected fleeting blips, small ships darting in and out of detection for mere seconds before vanishing again. The humans were using hit-and-run tactics that turned battles into puzzles. Dominion commanders found themselves reacting to shadows, forced to anticipate an enemy that refused to fight on predictable terms. Threxel's voice was grim as he briefed his commanders. Prepare for a war unlike any before. The humans will never face us head-on. They will strike when and where we least expect. Our only chance is to become as unpredictable as they are. The fleet began training for this new kind of warfare. Simulation after simulation tested their ability to respond to invisible threats. But morale was sinking. The mysterious disappearances and brutal effectiveness of human attacks haunted every officer and crewman. Late one night, alone in his quarters, Threxel replayed a haunting message sent from a crippled cruiser before it was lost entirely. They are not ships. They are nightmares. They come without warning, We cannot see them, but they see us. A cold dread settled in his chest. This war was no longer just about territory or pride. It was a battle for survival against an enemy that had turned the very darkness of space into a weapon. Threxall gripped the edge of his desk, voice low and resolute. If we do not understand the humans, we will not survive the shadows. The skies over Sindar Prime churned with acid storms and crimson lightning, casting an eerie glow over the scarred landscape. What had once been a bustling mining colony, rich with rare minerals vital to the Dominion's war effort, was now a battlefield soaked in chemical fire and unrelenting chaos. General Threxall Varun stood on the command bridge of the Dominion's flagship, watching the carnage unfold through reinforced viewports. Before them stretched the sprawling outposts of the human defenders, barely a dozen dropships deep, yet resolute and defiant against an invading force of over 1 million soldiers. The Dominion's command had expected an easy conquest. A world, so far from Earth's home system, with only primitive defenses, surely it would fall in days if not hours. They had been wrong. The humans on Sindar Prime fought not just with weapons, but with the planet itself. Environmental control compromised, reported the chief science officer, his voice tight with concern. They've seeded the atmosphere with engineered nanites. Our troops are suffering rapid cellular degradation. Threxall narrowed his eyes. Deploy atmospheric filters across all infantry units. Increase pressure suits integrity. But even as the orders were given, the storms howled louder. Acid, rain fell in sheets, burning flesh and corroding armor. Visibility dropped to near zero as lightning crackled overhead, illuminating twisted forms moving through the haze. Those forms were the human biodrones, terrifying creations that blurred the line between technology and living organism. Engineered to survive the planet's toxic environment, these creatures attacked in swarms, their limbs ending in razor-sharp claws and their bodies armored with synthetic chitin. Reports flooded in of Dominion squads being overrun, soldiers screaming, as they were torn apart by what the humans called wildlife. But these beasts were not natural. They were weapons, crafted to turn the landscape itself into a lethal ally. Threxall watched as an entire battalion, armored and armed to the teeth, was decimated in minutes by coordinated attacks from biodrones and human infantry who struck from the shadows. They fight like demons, muttered the battalion commander as he reported the loss. They are demons born from desperation, Threxall replied grimly. The humans' tactics defied every expectation. Instead of standing and fighting, they melted into the terrain, striking with hit-and-run raids, disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Their use of nanotechnology disrupted Dominion communications and sensor arrays, turning the invaders' own equipment against them. In one brutal encounter, a Dominion war machine, designed to bulldoze through enemy lines, was immobilized by nanites that ate through its circuitry, leaving it a smoking husk. On the communication lines, human leaders broadcast a single chilling message. This planet is our home. We will burn the skies before we let you have it. Threxall's mind raced as he realized that Sindar Prime was no longer just a mining colony. It was a fortress, forged not of walls but of environment and willpower. The Dominion's once proud legions were bleeding out, forced into a grueling war of attrition they could neither win nor afford to lose. When the storm reached its peak, visibility dropped to near zero. The battlefield became a hellscape of fire and acid. Dominion soldiers clawed at the ground for cover, their breath coming in ragged gasps behind protective masks. The humans moved through this chaos like shadows, their faces hidden beneath helmets streaked with streaks of mud and sweat, voices calm but deadly over comms. Threxall's voice was steady as he ordered a retreat. Pull back to secondary positions, we regroup and reassess. As the Dominion forces withdrew, the humans reclaimed their world, their defiance etched into every scorched tree and shattered rock. Threxall's eyes lingered on the war-torn horizon. We were slaughtered by beasts of our own making, he said quietly, the truth weighing heavy on his chest. The council would not hear of it as defeat, but Threxall knew the war for Sindar Prime had changed everything. Humanity was not merely surviving, They were mastering the art of warfare on a scale that terrified even the mightiest of empires. In the silence that followed, beneath the burning skies of a lost world, one thing was clear. The Dominion had met an enemy who fought not just with fire and steel, but with the relentless fury of nature itself, twisted into a weapon beyond imagining. In the dim glow of the war room aboard the Iron Spire, General Threxel Varun stared at the intercepted human communications flickering across the holographic displays. Among the chaotic bursts of chatter, one voice stood out, calm, precise, unyielding. Admiral Silva Threxel had studied the humans' tactics for months, but Silva's strategies revealed a mind unlike any he had encountered in the Dominion's long history of war. Where other human commanders seemed reckless or driven by emotion, Silva's decisions were surgical, calculated chaos designed to disorient and dismantle the enemy. He replayed the footage of a daring raid on the orbital defense array of the planet Arcalis 7. In that attack, a single dropship had slipped past multiple layers of defense, exploiting a weakness no Dominion tactician had predicted. The Iron Spire's tactical officer narrated the replay. The dropship approached at Vector 273, descending into the planet's shadow. Their approach speed and angle were unconventional, designed to confuse our targeting arrays. Threxel nodded slowly. A calculated risk. They gambled on our sensors being trained for predictable vectors. As the footage played, Threxel saw the tiny human vessel release a swarm of drones armed with electromagnetic pulses. The drones disabled the orbital defense grid's primary nodes in seconds, plunging the planet's surface into vulnerability. With the defenses down, human fighters streamed through the breach, waves of precision strikes dismantling communication, arrays and weapon emplacements before Dominion reinforcements could react. The general's third eye flickered violet as he considered the implications. This is no mere skirmish, it's a well-orchestrated symphony of destruction. He turned to the intelligence officer. What do we know of this Admiral Silva? The officer shrugged. Sparse details. We know Silva emerged from the Terran, Fleet's elite special operations, known for improvisation and psychological warfare. Their forces trust Silva implicitly, even when orders seem reckless. Threxel mused aloud. That trust is a weapon as powerful as any plasma cannon. The human commander's genius was not just in battlefield tactics, it was in understanding the human element, morale, fear, hope. Threxel recalled a report from a captured Dominion pilot who had been held prisoner and questioned by human forces. The pilot described Silva's battlefield presence as magnetic, able to rally troops from the brink of despair, turning exhaustion into fierce determination. That explains why their soldiers fight so relentlessly, Threxel said. It is not just technology or numbers, it is the will behind it. The general's mind shifted to a more troubling thought. The human's ability to innovate on the fly. Where the Dominion relied on strict command chains and standardized procedures, the humans adapted instantly, exploiting even minor openings with brutal efficiency. Another intercepted message confirmed this. During a fierce engagement near the belt of Orcan Prime, when Dominion forces expected a straightforward defense, Silva ordered an unexpected retreat, only to launch a devastating counterattack from an unanticipated vector hours later. It is a dance, Threxel said quietly. A deadly dance that we cannot predict. He clenched his fists. We have superior numbers and firepower, but they have something we lack. A mind that refuses to be boxed in by doctrine or fear. The room fell silent as the general contemplated the enormity of the challenge. The humans were not merely fighting for conquest. They were fighting for survival. And in that crucible, they forged tactics as fluid and lethal as a living storm. A junior officer ventured hesitantly. General, is it possible to capture or negotiate with this admiral? Silva? Threxel's eyes narrowed. No. Silva embodies the very spirit of humanity. Unyielding, unpredictable, and relentless. To capture Silva would be to cut off the head of the storm. But the storm would not cease. It would only grow fiercer. He paced slowly, voice low but resolute. We must learn to think like Silva, to abandon rigidity and embrace unpredictability. Only then can we hope to match the humans on the battlefield. As the briefing ended, Threxall gazed out at the stars beyond the command deck's viewport. Somewhere out there, Admiral Silva prepared her next move, calculating, waiting, ready to strike again. The human mind was the deadliest weapon the Dominion had ever faced, and the war was far from over. The void was fractured by the staccato flash of weapon fire as the Dominion fleet clashed once more with the elusive human forces above the shattered moon of Virex 9. The battle was unlike any the Dominion had faced before, chaotic, fluid, and terrifyingly effective. General Threxall Varun stood rigid on the bridge of the Iron Spire, the flagship trembling beneath the relentless assault. Around him, officers shouted orders, their faces drawn tight with tension. Human ships detected at Vector 117, the tactical officer reported urgently. They're using the new stealth tech again, barely visible on sensors. Threxall nodded, grimly. Focus all available energy on sensor arrays. We cannot let them slip through our defenses. The Iron Spire's new experimental sensors flickered and hummed, calibrated to pierce the humans' cloaking fields. For precious seconds, blips appeared, tiny, fast-moving vessels weaving through the Dominion's formation. Open fire, Threxall commanded. Plasma beams lanced through the dark, striking at the fleeting targets. Several human fighters erupted, in fiery blossoms, but many slipped away, ghosts in the void. Suddenly, the flagship jolted violently. Warning lights flared as an electromagnetic pulse disabled critical systems. Communications cut out in a crackle of static. Threxall gritted his teeth. They've targeted our command network. We're blind. Around him, crew scrambled to reroute, power, and restore systems. The humans were striking not just with weapons but with calculated sabotage. Then, a new threat emerged, a massive shadow on the battlefield. The Vanguard, a human dreadnought of unfamiliar design, detached from the swarm. Unlike smaller fighters, it carried a weapon never before seen by the Dominion, a gravitic pulse emitter capable of distorting space itself. The Vanguard unleashed a devastating blast that warped the very fabric of the void, crushing the hulls of several Dominion cruisers and sending debris spiraling into the abyss. Threxall's eyes narrowed in fury. We must destroy that ship before it tears us apart. The fleet rallied, converging on the Vanguard with volleys of plasma and missile fire. The humans responded with a coordinated defense, fighters swarming to protect their flagship, drones weaving between the Dominion's weapons fire. Amid the chaos, Threxall received an urgent transmission, encrypted, urgent. It was from Admiral Silva. I see your pride, General. Her voice crackled through the comm. But pride blinds you. We fight for survival, and we will win. Threxall's lips curled into a snarl, then prepare to be crushed. The battle reached a fever pitch. Dominion ships pressed in, weapons blazing. But the humans fought with an intensity born of desperation and hope, exploiting every weakness with savage precision. Then, something unexpected happened. The Iron Spire's scientists unveiled a new weapon, an experimental plasma lance designed to focus immense energy into a single, devastating beam. The weapon required precision and timing, but if it hit its mark, it could cripple even the largest ships. Threxall gave the order. The lance charged, a brilliant spear of light stabbing through the void. It struck the Vanguard's hull with a thunderous explosion, ripping through the gravitic emitter and sending the dreadnought spinning out of control. With their flagship crippled, the human forces faltered. Dominion fighters seized the opportunity, pressing the attack. The Vanguard exploded in a blinding inferno, its remains scattering like stars across the void. But the victory was costly. The Dominion fleet had suffered heavy losses. Hundreds of ships burned or drifted, crippled by the humans' relentless tactics and the unforgiving environment. Threxall looked around at the devastation, voice heavy with the burden of command. This is only the beginning. They have strength, innovation, and will. But so do we. As the Dominion regrouped, the war had shifted. The humans had shown they could unleash terrifying new technology, but the Dominion had answered with devastating force of their own. Outside the viewport, The cold stars watched silently, indifferent to the fate of empires. One thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same. The corridors of the Dominion High Council buzzed with tension, the weight of recent defeats casting long shadows over the Grand Chamber. General Threxal Varun stood silently as the councilors debated the next move, their voices sharp with frustration and fear. "The humans grow bolder," hissed Councilor Viel, his 3 eyes narrowing. "Our fleets bleed, our worlds tremble. What more must happen before we change strategy?" "War is not just fought on battlefields," Threxal interjected, voice steady but firm. "We must fight their minds as well as their ships." The councilors exchanged uneasy glances. Threxal's proposal was radical: a covert campaign aimed at destabilizing human supply lines, sabotaging their technology, and infiltrating their command structure. They needed an edge, and quickly, thousands of light years away. Aboard the human stealth frigate Shadow's Edge, Commander Elena Silva reviewed her latest intelligence report. The war had driven her forces to the brink, but the tide was shifting. Her team had uncovered a Dominion plot to infiltrate human colonies with sleeper agents, aliens trained to mimic human appearance and behavior, poised to strike at critical moments. "Silva, what's our counter?" asked Lieutenant Harris, tense but confident. Silva's eyes hardened. "We strike first, disrupt their networks before they can act." Her plan was audacious. A small strike team would infiltrate Dominion space to sabotage their communications hub on the asteroid station Veklar. Destroying it would sever Dominion command links, buying precious time for human forces to regroup and counterattack. The mission was dangerous, the odds stacked against them, but for Silva, risk was a calculated tool. Back in Dominion space, the political climate grew more unstable. The Council's confidence faltered as reports of sabotage and espionage undermined their grip on the outer colonies. Councilor Viel accused rival factions of betrayal, while others demanded harsher crackdowns on suspected sympathizers. The once monolithic Dominion showed cracks beneath its surface. Amid this turmoil, Threxal prepared his own covert operations unit, a specialized task force trained in guerrilla tactics and intelligence warfare. His orders were clear: root out human spies, disrupt their plans, and regain the initiative. "We fight in the shadows now," Threxal told his officers. "Victory will come not just from strength, but from cunning." As the Shadow's Edge slipped through the void toward Veklar, Silva's team prepared for the infiltration. Clad in stealth suits and armed with EMP grenades, hacking devices, and compact pulse rifles, they moved like ghosts. The asteroid station loomed, a fortress of steel and sensor arrays, bristling with defenses. The Dominion's communications hub was a maze of corridors, guarded by elite soldiers and automated turrets. Inside the station, Dominion officers prepared for a routine shift, unaware of the deadly threat approaching. Silva's team bypassed perimeter sensors with precision, disabling security nodes as they advanced. Time was against them. The longer they stayed, the greater the risk of detection. Reaching the core, they deployed their charges, setting the sabotage in motion. Explosions rocked the station as power flickered, and communications died. As alarms blared, the team fought through Dominion reinforcements, their training and determination carrying them through narrow escapes and fierce firefights. Finally, with the mission complete, they retreated into the cold void, their success a beacon of hope for the human resistance. Back on the Iron Spire, Threxal received the first reports of the attack on Veklar. The Council erupted in fury and panic. Communications were severed across multiple fronts, and Dominion fleets struggled to coordinate defenses. Threxal saw both danger and opportunity. The humans had struck a significant blow, but their success revealed the vulnerabilities of the Dominion's sprawling empire. "It is a new kind of war," Threxal reflected aloud. "Not fought by fleets alone, but in the dark corners of space and minds. We must evolve, or perish." As the covert war intensified, both sides understood a deeper truth. This conflict was no longer just about territory or pride. It was a battle for survival in a galaxy that had become a deadly game of shadows, strategy, and willpower. And the humans, against all odds, were proving to be masters of that game. The war had stretched across light years and shattered worlds, but now it came to its climax in the orbit of Terra Nova, the last major human stronghold in Dominion space. The stars beyond the command deck of the Iron Spire burned cold and indifferent, as if watching the final act of a cosmic tragedy unfold. General Threxal Varun stood tall, his armor gleaming under the pale light. Around him, his officers prepared the fleet for what would be a battle for the ages. The Dominion's massive armada dwarfed anything the humans could muster, but that advantage counted for little now, because this time, the humans were waiting. Across the void, Human Admiral Elena Silva commanded her forces from the bridge of the Resolute, a warship scarred by countless battles but unbeaten in spirit. The air hummed with the quiet determination of those who knew the stakes. Their homes, their species, everything depended on what would happen next. "We know their numbers," Silva said, voice calm but fierce. "But they do not know our resolve." The battle erupted with the fury of a supernova. The Dominion fleet unleashed volleys of plasma and missiles, a tidal wave of destruction aimed at breaking the human line in a single blow. But the humans danced through the onslaught with eerie grace, their ships weaving in unpredictable patterns, shield pulses timed perfectly to absorb and deflect the Dominion's wrath. Threxal growled, "They fight like specters, never where we expect, always striking where we are weakest." Human fighters surged forward in tight formations, targeting Dominion supply vessels and weapon platforms with surgical precision. Boarding pods launched, and ships locked in brutal close combat rarely seen in modern space warfare. Amid the chaos, Silva made her move. "Prepare the quantum disruptor," she ordered, the human secret weapon developed in the darkest days of the war, a device capable of scrambling Dominion command signals and crippling their fleet coordination. Threxal's sensors flickered as the disruptor's wave rolled over the Dominion armada. Ships lost synchronization, formations collapsed, and confusion spread like wildfire. Seizing the moment, human strike teams blasted through the disarray, crippling flagship communications and targeting Dominion command centers with devastating effectiveness. On the bridge of the Iron Spire, Threxal's calm shattered. "Regain control. Countermeasures now." But the Dominion's response was sluggish, marred by conflicting orders and broken links. Silva's voice came over the comm, steady and unyielding. "General Varun, your empire has fought bravely. But this galaxy belongs to those who adapt, who endure. Surrender and spare your people further suffering." Threxal's eyes burned with a mix of anger and respect. "We do not surrender." He activated the ship's last reserve power, initiating a self-destruct sequence that would take the flagship, and the humans with it, if defeat was inevitable. As alarms blared and the countdown began, a sudden explosion rocked the Iron Spire. A small human boarding party had breached the hull. Threxal drew his blade, meeting them with a warrior's fury. The battle inside the flagship was brutal and desperate. Steel clashed against armor. Every corridor became a killing ground. Yet as the seconds ticked down, Threxal found himself face to face with Admiral Silva. Their eyes locked, two commanders bound by the same unbreakable will. "End this madness," Silva said quietly, raising her weapon. "There is a future beyond this war." Threxal hesitated. For the first time, he saw not an enemy but a worthy adversary fighting for her people's survival. "Perhaps," he replied, voice heavy with grudging respect, "but only if both sides choose to endure." Outside, the Iron Spire's self-destruct sequence was halted. The fleet stood down, the battle ending not with annihilation, but a fragile ceasefire. In the quiet that followed, both sides began to see a new path, not one of conquest, but coexistence. The war had tested the limits of courage, innovation, and willpower. The humans had survived the Dominion's might not by overwhelming force, but by embracing the chaos of battle, adapting with cunning, and refusing to break. Threxal Varun would forever carry the memory of that war, not as a tale of defeat, but as a lesson in the terrifying might of humanity. The galaxy watched on, forever changed by the storm of fire and shadow. And somewhere in the vastness, the human spirit burned brighter than ever. Undaunted, unyielding, unstoppable.